We don't want to see this disfellowshipping arrangement simply as some cold disciplinary action, a threat that tries to motivate people, well, be good or we're going to kick you out. No, it's an arrangement that's based on love. One, it's love for Jehovah, for his name, for his clean standards. But two, it's love for the individual wrongdoer. And now, even though it is a theocratic arrangement and it is an arrangement based in love, it doesn't mean that there are no challenges or emotional pain involved, especially when a close relative stops serving Jehovah.
This footage, leaked in December 2020 from a members-only section of the Jehovah's Witness website, graphically demonstrates how millions of followers are clearly encouraged to shun former members as an act of love, even in cases where a close relative is ejected, a brother, sister, father, mother, son, or daughter. When someone stops being a Jehovah's Witness, even if it's just because they've had a change of heart or stopped believing, the challenges and emotional pain are felt by more than just those doing the shunning. The cruelty and torment of ostracism has driven some who find themselves disfellowshipped or excommunicated as far as suicide. Though a person's freedom of worship, including their freedom to leave a religion if they so choose, is a fundamental human right enshrined in the Universal Declaration, until very recently this has had virtually no practical application to the thousands each year who exit the Jehovah's Witness religion and find themselves on the receiving end of this brutal treatment. But over 6 years ago, one man who happens to be a close friend of mine, Patrick Hayek from Belgium, asked the question, what if? What if Jehovah's Witnesses were held accountable for their shunning policy using the same laws they frequently appeal to when arguing their religious freedoms in the various countries where their preaching work is prohibited? In 2014, Patrick decided to test the water by hiring a lawyer and seeing how far he could go in suing the organisation in Belgium for the shunning he and his family were experiencing since leaving the group. Though he'd been willing to shoulder the legal costs himself, the state prosecutor took on the case because they found a clear breach of the country's anti-discrimination laws had occurred, not only in Patrick's case, but also in the cases of other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who came forward. Fast forward to February 16th, 2021, and the criminal court in Ghent finally sat down to hear the legal arguments, with representatives from the Jehovah's Witness organisation present in the courtroom. The court's decision is due next week, but coincidentally, for complicated reasons, I have an opportunity to interview my good friend Patrick right here in Croatia. In fact, not far away from where I live. Of which more in voiceover. When Patrick isn't fighting cults over human rights violations, his day job involves drilling giant metal screws into the ground as an alternative to concrete foundations. It turns out this relatively new technology is in hot demand in Croatia, especially following the recent earthquakes, which have exposed the frailties of more traditional building methods. So the Croatian government invited Patrick and his business partners to demonstrate their tech, which they did on a farm about half an hour away from my home. There was no way I was going to miss such a golden opportunity to interview my old friend in person. With the Belgian verdict looming just a few days later, I waited surrounded by pigs and tractors for my opportunity to pull Patrick to one side and ask what had brought him to the brink of a potentially momentous legal decision on his former faith.
So we filed a complaint against Jehovah's Witnesses, and after a thorough investigation by the judicial police that took about 3 years, the public prosecutor, accepted the complaint, and what's more, he was inviting Jehovah's Witnesses before a court. So I didn't have to start the court case. It was the public prosecutor who continued with all this, because he said there is at least the recognition of the existence of shunning, and this needs to be stopped. And we are not looking after putting people in prison, because Jehovah's Witnesses would like that and say, oh, we are persecuted. So that's not the case. We don't want to stop Jehovah's Witnesses in what they believe. We just want to stop them in attacking the human rights. And that's what the public prosecutor understood very clearly. And since then, there was a lot of writing. Jehovah's Witnesses took a lawyer, a top lawyer, a good lawyer, and he did his best with what he had. And you could see during the court case that there was very difficult for him, because there was not so much material in the positive sense of for Jehovah's Witnesses. But he did a very good thing, seeing that he has to defend the Jehovah's Witnesses. So mainly he said, well, we are not responsible for that because it is not Jehovah's Witnesses in Belgium who prescribe the shunning policy. This is coming from America, and this is not our responsibility. We have nothing to see with this. Another thing was nobody is obliged to follow the shunning rule. This is a free interpretation of what the Bible is telling us. And one of the lawyers was even handling the Bible, because he himself is one of Jehovah's Witnesses in Holland, and he was defending Jehovah's Witnesses in Utrecht as well. So he came over especially for helping Jehovah's Witnesses in Belgium. So they were reading from the Bible, and he said, this is the first time I used the Bible in courtroom. But it was so ridiculous. Of course, if you read in the Bible, then that's the text that says that you need to stone homosexuals to death, then everybody would say this is not possible that you bring this in practice. What we say is such like, just like you do not practice this text about homosexuals and stoning them, you just need to avoid the application of shunning people who are not longer one of your fellow believers.
Patrick's legal challenge was audacious and hitherto untried. In calling for an entire religion to be penalised over its religious practices, he would need all the help he could get. I was reminded of when Patrick had taken me to meet his lawyer, Evelyn van der Hoeke, near the beginning of the whole process in early 2015. Back then, Evelyn was under no illusions about the size of the task ahead, but was cautiously optimistic provided they could get enough people to come forward.
Well, I think it will be a very difficult case. It's a first try, but it's worth trying it. It's not that simple, but we will try it.
Yeah, sure.
It's very important that a lot of people join us, because if the weight is heavier, we will have more impact on the judge. I think it will be totally new for them, and the most difficult thing is to describe how the feelings are of people who are involved in this kind of situation.
That's right. The key to success would therefore be for Patrick to win as many allies as possible, both from among fellow ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and also external organisations with an interest in human rights issues. And as the court hearing showed, that's exactly what he succeeded in doing.
There was also a governmental organization that is protecting people for or against discrimination and hate crimes. And that's a Unia in Belgium, unia.be. And they were looking at the file, that the complaint that was filed. And they said this is a case of hate and inciting to hate. This is discrimination and inciting to discrimination. So we need to protect the society against the shunning policy of Jehovah's Witnesses. And they did a marvelous job by citing law texts in the Human Rights Declaration. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses try to attack that. We had also Evelyn, who is a lawyer specialized in family rights, but also in everything that is going about all what has to see with cults and cultic characteristics of an organization. So she made a very beautiful summary of how severe the emotional and the psychological impact of shunning on people is. So I think there was a very thorough explanation of all the lawyers together. We had two ladies who were excommunicated about 35 years ago, who were invited to come in front of the judge and explain what they experienced after one was 42 years ago excommunicated. And she said, well, my daughter is not talking to me, my sister is not talking to me. I thought, okay, I'm excommunicated, but in fact, I got a lifetime sentence, a lifelong sentence. And I will never get rid of that unless I go back to Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is not what I want to. So the only thing she said, what I want is respect. I do not believe it any longer. I don't want to attack you, but please do normal. Do not destroy the family bonds. This is it. This makes no sense.
As someone himself impacted by the cruelty of shunning from this group, I couldn't help but admire Patrick's tenacity and the careful, methodical way in which he generated enough support to make the strongest possible case against the organisation. But I still wanted to know his response to those concerned about what amounted to state intervention in matters of faith. What do you say to those who see this issue as state versus church and say, well, you can have these anti-discrimination laws, but is it right to be interfering in what a religion does? Shouldn't a religion be allowed to create its own rules? As distasteful and as harmful as these rules may be, it's the right of the religion to set these rules.
Well, my own lawyers started with this question in the very beginning. They said exactly the same as what you are telling me now. And I said, well, if I have the right to practice my own religion, then I need to become an extremist Muslim. And then I think you're a very wicked pagan, and I need to make you lose your head. If this is my religious right and the state cannot intervene. So they immediately said, this is murder. And well, I said, this is hate, this is inciting to hate, because they are putting this in a publication. They tell it from the platform in their kingdom halls. This is discrimination, this is inciting to discrimination, and this is a violation of the human rights. So once a religion is violating the civil rights or the human rights, then the state needs to protect people against violation of those rights.
Patrick's logic was blunt but persuasive. Why should just about anyone be able to do just about anything using religion as cover when there are all too many grisly examples in recent history of where this can lead? With the verdict only days away, Patrick was upbeat about his prospects.
So everything together, the court case was on the 16th of February. And now we are expecting next Tuesday the verdict of the judge. And to be honest, I don't know what the verdict will be, because the judge was just listening with a very strict face, not a smile, not angry, just listening, taking notes. But what the public prosecutor was saying is already a part of the courtroom, so I think we are going in a very positive direction.
But having invested so many years in this case, surely you would be devastated if the court sided with Jehovah's Witnesses?
In fact, no, not really. My final goal is to get before the European court. So if Jehovah's Witnesses are condemned by the Belgian court, and they say, we are accepting the verdict, then everything stops. So in a way, I would like that the judge is saying, you're right, this is your religious right to shun people. Then I can go and say, I do not agree, and I can go step by step to a higher court till I have reached the end of the Belgian court, and then I can go to the European court. So in a way, if I look at what Jehovah's Witnesses are really doing past months, If they lose a court case, they just say, okay, we accept, and then it's finished. Then it's only good for Belgium, but the target is bigger than that.
Just 5 days after this conversation was filmed, the verdict was handed down by the criminal court in Ghent, and it would prove to be a setback for Patrick, at least as far as his dream of appealing to a higher court was concerned. The court ruled in his favour against Jehovah's Witnesses, fining them €96,000 for violating his rights and those of his fellow plaintiffs.
Uitspraak in de zaak VZ2 Christelijke Gemeente van Jehovah's Getuigen.
Het is ex-Jehovah-getuige Patrick Haak die samen met 14 andere lotgenoten en ook gelijke kansencentrum Unia naar de rechtbank stapt. Samen willen ze de onmenselijke uitsluitingspraktijken van de geloofsgemeenschap laten veroordelen en dat is gelukt.
Het gaat ons niet zozeer om de straf, het gaat ons vooral om de erkenning van het misdrijf. Het aanzetten tot haat, het aanzetten tot discriminatie. Eindelijk worden slachtoffers erkend als wat ze zijn, slachtoffers.
De geloofsgemeenschap zelf is verrast door de uitspraak die volgens haar enkel gebaseerd is op een paar individuele gevallen.
Het ging nooit over de 25.000 Jehovah's getuigen in België die hun zogezegd oneerlijk bejegend zouden hebben. En het is nu eenmaal niet aan een rechtbank om zich uit te spreken over interpersoonlijke relaties.
Maar de rechtbank denkt hier anders over en veroordeelt de geloofsgemeenschap. Religie staat niet boven de wet, benadrukt ze.
Als Jehovah's getuigen zijn wij altijd gebaseerd op wat de Bijbel zegt. En die interne regels die hier aangeklaagd worden zijn allemaal daarop gebaseerd. Dus het is redelijk toch wel verrassend voor ons om te horen dat een rechtbank nu zegt dat het illegaal geworden is om bijbelse principes te volgen.
Of de veroordeling ook echt impact zal hebben, valt nog af te wachten.
De Jehovah's getuigen staan in België natuurlijk niet alleen. Ook zij dienen strikt gehoorzaam te zijn aan wat er vanuit de Verenigde Staten, vanuit de centrale leiding, het centrale bestuur van Jehovah's getuigen wordt gedicteerd. Dus zij kunnen niet zomaar eigen gereid optreden en zeggen van we gaan dat in ons eigen landje aanpassen.
De geloofsgemeenschap kan nog in beroep gaan tegen het vonnis.
For reasons he's made clear, appealing is exactly what Patrick hopes the organisation will do. And as he's already shown, he is in this for the long haul. 5 years plus with this lawsuit. You're not sure where it's going to end up next week when the decision is made. Was it worth it?
Of course it was worth it. If I see how many people around me, ex-GWs, even GWs who are in the background following the whole thing, who got courage and said, finally someone is doing something about it, then I say, well, it was worth it. I've seen people who were on the edge of committing suicide, who revived, who started their life again. They saw that it is possible to have a life after being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is the main pleasure I have to see what is happening around me.
As satisfying as the win will be for Patrick, it's worth remembering that this verdict, with its €96,000 fine, amounts to little more than a slapped wrist for a multi-billion-dollar religious organisation, and in only one European country at that. But through his incredible perseverance and dedication, Patrick has received priceless validation for the wrongness of his treatment, and perhaps crucially, he's shown it is possible to hold religious organisations accountable for human rights violations. And if Jehovah's Witnesses make the mistake of appealing the verdict, who knows where else this story might lead, and what legal precedents could be set that might crank up the pressure still more on the Jehovah's Witness organisation, ultimately improving the lives of generations to come.